Welcome to Ghostly Darken. Tonight, we journey through the darkest corners of Japan, where the line between the living and the dead blurs, and some stories will make you question what's real. Prepare yourself for 8 chilling, true Japanese horror stories that will haunt you long after the video ends. Let's begin. Story 1: The Haunted Village of Aokigahara. At the base of Mount Fuji in Japan, lies Aokigahara, a dense forest that is eerily quiet and unnerving. It has long been known as the Suicide Forest, as many have come here to end their lives, drawn by its isolated and haunting beauty. But there's more to this forest than just its tragic history. Local legends tell of spirits that wander, unable to find peace, forever trapped among the trees. The forest's reputation has spread far and wide, and those who enter often report strange, unsettling occurrences. Some say they hear whispers in the wind, faint voices calling their name from deep within the trees. Others feel an inexplicable sense of dread, as though they are being watched by unseen eyes. And when the fog rolls in, the feeling of being lost becomes overwhelming, even for experienced hikers. There's one particular tale of a hiker who ventured into the forest alone, unaware of the dangers that awaited him. As he walked deeper into the woods, he noticed something strange and unnatural: silence. The birds had stopped singing, the rustling of the leaves ceased. He continued walking, but soon, he realized he was completely lost. Panic set in, and he tried retracing his steps, but it was no use. No matter which way he went, he couldn't escape. Days passed before searchers found his body, deep in the forest. His eyes were wide open, frozen in a state of pure terror, and his mouth was stretched open as if he had screamed. Yet no sound had been heard from him, not even a whisper. Locals say the spirits of those who die in the forest haunt it, and that the forest itself is cursed, pulling in anyone who dares to enter. Story 2: The Woman in the Mirror, Kagami Joru. Deep in the mountains of Japan, in a small, forgotten village, there's a legend about an ancient mirror. It's said to have been passed down for generations, hidden away in a dusty old house, where it sat untouched for years. But there's a curse that comes with it. The legend warns that if you gaze into the mirror at midnight, you'll see the woman. She has long black hair that covers her face, and her eyes, if you can ever see them, are empty, lifeless. At first, she appears to be nothing more than a reflection, but the longer you stare, the more real she becomes. Slowly, she moves closer, her long fingers reaching out toward you. And as she draws near, her whisper begins, soft at first, almost like the wind, but it grows louder and more insistent. She speaks of your deepest fears, your darkest secrets, the things you've tried to forget. With each word, she tightens her grip on your mind. One evening, a man, skeptical of the stories, decided to test the curse. He found the mirror in an old house and waited until midnight. The moment he gazed into it, he felt a chill run down his spine. At first, nothing happened. But then, the figure of a woman began to appear. Her face was hidden by her hair, but he could feel her presence, as if she was standing right behind him. His heart raced, and he turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panicked, he turned back to the mirror. The woman was there, inches away from him. Her whisper grew louder, telling him things he didn't want to hear. The last thing he said before his voice was silenced was, "She's coming for me." When his family found him the next day, his body was cold, and his eyes were wide open in terror. He had died, staring at the very thing that had claimed him. Story 3: The Black-Haired Woman, Kurakami Anna. Japan is home to many ghost stories, but few are as chilling as that of the Kurakami Anna, the black-haired woman. She is said to have once been a beautiful young woman, loved by a man who betrayed her. In a fit of rage, he murdered her, and her vengeful spirit now roams, searching for those who dare to cross her path. The Kurakami Anna is always seen in a long, flowing black kimono, her hair long and dark, covering most of her face. Her eyes, if you can see them, are full of anger and sorrow, the pain of a woman who was wronged in life. Many people claim to have seen her in the most unexpected places, in remote villages, abandoned inns, and along dark, lonely roads. They say that if she looks at you with her unblinking eyes, she will slowly draw you into her world, a world of endless darkness. One particular man stayed at a remote inn deep in the mountains. It was an old, rundown place, with creaky floors and rooms that smelled of dust. When he arrived, the innkeeper warned him about strange happenings at night, but the man, thinking it was nothing more than superstition, ignored the advice. That night, as he lay in bed, he heard a soft knocking at the door. He ignored it at first, but the knocking grew louder and more insistent. Finally, he opened the door, only to find nothing there. Confused and frightened, he turned to go back to bed. But as he closed the door, he saw her standing in the corner of the room. The woman's hair covered her face, and her eyes stared at him with an intensity that froze him in place. When he tried to run, the door slammed shut, trapping him in the room with her. The last thing he saw before everything went black was her hand reaching toward him, and her voice whispering, "You will never leave." The innkeeper later found the room empty, but the man's belongings were scattered around, and his last scream echoed in the walls of the inn. Story 4, The Doll That Moves, Okiku. In a small, quiet town in Japan, there is a doll named Okiku, and it is said to be the most terrifying doll in the world. Okiku was once owned by a little girl who died under mysterious circumstances, but her spirit remained with the doll. The doll's hair, once neat and tidy, started to grow longer and longer, despite no one ever cutting it. Over time, it became clear that something was wrong with the doll. Its hair continued to grow, and the doll's eyes began to change, taking on a more lifelike appearance. The girl's family was disturbed by the changes, so they took the doll to a temple in Hokkaido, hoping that a priest might be able to perform an exorcism. But the priest, after examining the doll, was convinced it was possessed. He said that the doll had a spirit trapped inside of it, one that was unwilling to leave. Since then, the doll has remained in the temple, and visitors report strange sensations when they come near it. Some say they can feel a cold breeze when they stand too close to the doll, while others have claimed to hear faint whispers, as if the spirit of the little girl is trying to communicate. The most unsettling part of the doll's curse is its hair. Every time someone tries to cut it, it grows back, longer than before. And those who have come into close contact with the doll have reported bad luck or strange occurrences in their own lives. Story 5, The Whispering Tunnel, Q. In the mountains of Japan, hidden from most eyes, lies an ancient tunnel known as Q. Its dark, crumbling entrance is barely noticeable, often overlooked by travelers passing through. But there's something eerie about this place, something that draws people in, even though they don't know why. It's said that the tunnel is cursed, and those who enter will hear whispers coming from deep within the walls, whispers that don't seem to belong to any living person. Locals speak of the tragic past of Q Tunnel. Many years ago, a terrible accident occurred there, a deadly crash involving a train that was traveling through the tunnel. The crash took many lives, and since that day, the tunnel has been haunted by the spirits of those who perished. These spirits are restless, angry, and they call out to anyone who dares to pass through. The whispers are said to begin softly, barely audible, like the sound of wind blowing through the tunnel. But as you walk deeper into the darkness, the voices grow louder and clearer, until they seem to be right next to you. Some say that the voices are the souls of the victims, repeating their final moments, reliving their fear and pain over and over. Others believe the whispers are a warning, a sign that once you hear them, you'll never leave. One night, a group of friends decided to test the legend. Armed with flashlights and their phones to document the experience, they entered the tunnel, their footsteps echoing off the damp stone walls. At first, the tunnel was silent. But as they ventured deeper, they began to hear it, the faint whisper of their names. At first, they thought it was just their imagination, but then it grew louder, until one of the group members felt a cold hand on their shoulder. They turned around, but no one was there. The group panicked and tried to leave, but the tunnel seemed to stretch on endlessly. No matter how far they walked, the exit seemed to stay out of reach. They finally fled in terror, but not before hearing the last whisper, clear and chilling, "You'll never leave." When they looked back, the entrance had vanished, and they were trapped in the darkness. They barely escaped with their lives, but one of them swears that he can still hear the whispers in his ears every night. Story 6, The Creepy Shrine, Kiyomizudera. Kiyomizudera is one of Japan's most famous and revered shrines. Its beautiful, sweeping views of Kyoto attract tourists from all over the world. However, beneath the peaceful surface of this ancient temple lies a dark secret, one that many prefer not to acknowledge. Hidden deep within the shrine is a forgotten room, sealed off from the public. Inside this room are hundreds of small statues, each with a twisted expression on their face. They appear almost lifelike, their eyes wide open, mouths contorted in silent screams. It is said that these statues were once human, cursed by their own sins. Many years ago, the shrine's priest had committed terrible acts, betraying the trust of the temple's followers. As punishment, the priest was cursed to become one with the statues, forced to live in eternal agony, his soul trapped within each one. The statues are said to be the vessels for the spirits of those he wronged, each one eternally suffering for their sins. Legend has it that anyone who ventures into the hidden chamber will feel a sense of dread wash over them. The air becomes thick, heavy with the weight of the souls trapped inside. Those who have entered the chamber report hearing faint whispers, their own names called out from the darkness. Some even claim to have seen the statues' eyes follow them as they move through the room. It's said that if you stand still long enough, the statues will begin to move, inching closer toward you, their twisted faces filled with anger. One night, a young traveler, curious about the shrine's legends, decided to sneak into the hidden chamber. As soon as he entered, he felt a cold chill in the air. The statues seemed to watch him, their eyes unblinking. He tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. Panic set in as he looked around, feeling the walls closing in on him. Suddenly, he heard a low growl, and when he turned, the statues seemed to move, slowly but surely, toward him. He ran as fast as he could, and when he finally escaped the chamber, he swore he could still feel the eyes of the statues upon him, even though he was miles away. That night, he had a nightmare where the statues followed him, and when he woke up, he found strange markings on his body, marks that weren't there before. He never returned to Kayamizudera, but locals still say he's haunted by the spirits of those statues, unable to escape the curse. Story 7, The Woman Who Never Left, Takedo Yurii. Along the Takedo Highway in Japan, travelers sometimes report strange sightings, especially late at night. The road winds through remote villages, and it's common for drivers to pick up hitchhikers. But there's one hitchhiker that no one wants to pick up. She's known as the Takedo Yurii, the ghostly woman who never left. Her story is one of betrayal and heartbreak, a tale that has haunted the highway for centuries. Years ago, a woman was tragically murdered by her lover, who left her body on the side of the road. Her spirit, full of anger and sadness, could not rest. She now roams the highway, appearing to travelers, hoping to find the man who betrayed her. She is often seen standing by the side of the road, dressed in a long, white kimono, her face obscured by her long, disheveled hair. Legend has it that if you stop to offer her help, she will get into your car, but as soon as you glance at her, her face will be revealed a pale, twisted mask of death. Her eyes, empty and lifeless, will lock onto yours, and you'll feel an overwhelming sense of dread. Some say that if you give her a ride, you will never make it to your destination. Your car will veer off the road, crashing into a tree or falling into a ravine, and your life will be claimed by the vengeful spirit of the woman. One man, driving late one evening, saw her standing by the road. Thinking she was just a lost traveler, he stopped to offer her a ride. As she climbed into the back seat, he didn't think much of it. But when he looked into the rearview mirror, he saw her face. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale as death, and her lips twisted into a sinister smile. Terrified, he slammed on the brakes, but the car swerved violently, and before he knew it, he crashed into a tree. His last memory was of her cold, lifeless face as he lost consciousness. When the authorities arrived, there was no sign of the woman, only the wrecked car and the man's lifeless body. Story 8, The Vengeful Spirit of the Hotel, Yurii. By the coast, there's an old hotel that has been in operation for decades. It was once a luxurious getaway for the wealthy, offering breathtaking views of the ocean and a peaceful retreat from the hustle and bustle of life. But over time, strange things began to happen. Guests who stayed at the hotel would report hearing a soft knock on their door in the middle of the night. When they opened the door, no one was there, but the air in the hallway would be thick with the scent of perfume, a perfume that smelled like death. Legend has it that the hotel is haunted by a vengeful spirit, a woman who was murdered by her lover, a jealous man who couldn't stand the thought of her being with anyone else. The spirit, furious and heartbroken, now roams the halls of the hotel, seeking revenge on anyone who stays there. Her ghost is said to appear in the dead of night, her long black hair flowing around her face, her body wrapped in a white gown. When you look into her eyes, you can see nothing but emptiness, a void that pulls you in. One man, traveling for business, checked into the hotel late one evening. He was given a room on the top floor, where the view of the ocean was supposed to be the best. That night, he heard the knock on his door. Thinking it was room service, he opened it, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty, but the air was heavy with perfume. As he stepped back into his room, he saw her standing in the corner, her face hidden by her long hair. The man froze, unable to move as she slowly turned to face him. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth twisted in a grotesque smile. Before he could react, she moved toward him, her hand outstretched, her fingers cold as ice. The man tried to scream, but no sound came out. As the woman reached for him, the lights flickered, and everything went dark. The next morning, the hotel staff found the man's room empty. His suitcase was still there, but he had vanished without a trace. They say the spirit of the woman took him, and he's never been seen again. These are just a few of Japan's darkest horror stories. If these tales left you shivering with fear, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to never miss a haunting. Share this video with those brave enough to uncover more, and leave us your thoughts below. Until next time, stay safe and beware the shadows. This is Ghostly Darkin, signing off.